I just fell into it, really. I didn't understand the legalities of it. I stood in my own way lots of times. I just find that really hard to imagine.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Lindsey, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. So you're a teacher at one point in your life and you're not technically a teacher anymore. You have a business in the tuition space. How did you make that transition? What happened in life to make you realise that was where you wanted to now focus your energy?
Hi, thanks for having me. So I was a teacher for 21 years. And the last 4 years of that, I was a deputy head. I loved teaching. I never thought I would do anything else. And then one October morning in 2020, I woke up on a Monday morning to go to work and couldn't get out of bed, basically. So my body was working, functioning perfectly fine, but it was the strangest experience of almost like a disconnect between my brain and my body. And although I knew what I needed to do, it was almost like my brain wasn't telling my body to do it. In hindsight, looking back, I'd burnt out and I didn't go to work, and I didn't go to work for a couple of weeks actually after that. And I realised that I needed to leave teaching, that it was making me really unwell. So I did a few things over that year at school. I reduced my leadership responsibility. I went back into class because I wasn't class-based at the time. I reduced my days to 3 days a week. And yeah, that was the start of my journey. So I spent the next few months hoping that the obvious job choice would come up. I was fully expecting to stay in education in some way. I didn't have a clue what else I could do because I'd been teaching for so long, and I was looking around for jobs. Nothing came up that I really wanted. And by April, I realised at Easter that actually it was unlikely that something was going to turn up. So I started looking into being self-employed. I looked into a few options. I didn't really think about tutoring at all. I thought I was done with teaching. I thought I'd had enough. And a family member actually said, why didn't I give it a go? She thought I'd be really good. So yeah, I just fell into it, really. I started offering around to people that I knew, family and friends, telling them that I was going to start tutoring. And it just exploded, really. I was still doing 3 days a week. I'd gone down to 3 days a week just to see out my school year because I didn't want to leave partway through the year. And for that first term, I just tutored a couple of evenings a week. And as soon as I started, I absolutely loved it. I realised it was like all the best bits about teaching. It was just the actual teaching, and that was what I'd gone into teaching for, and that had somehow got lost along the way. And I really enjoyed it and filled up my spaces really quickly, started doing it full time from the summer, and that was it. I haven't looked back.
So you did become a tutor, but not just that. You are actually on a scaling journey now, aren't you? Getting lots of tutors on board. So how many tutors have you actually got on board now? And when did you realise you were going to have to make that choice to either have a massive waiting list and have this as a job or build a business?
Yeah, so I currently have 7 tutors that work with me. I've built the other side of the business with tutors working with me quite slowly over the last 12 months. It was really important for me that the tutors that came to work with me were really good quality. I could trust them. I knew they would do an amazing job. And actually, what happened was I realized about a year before I actually took the plunge to take on other tutors that it was something that I needed to do. I had a really long waiting list and I was just a bit terrified actually of taking on other people. I felt like I didn't understand the legalities of it. I didn't know if I would be able to find tutors that I thought could do a really good job. And I was a bit worried because I'd built up this nice, lovely business that I'd got a good reputation. And I was really nervous. And I probably should have done it about 12 months earlier than I did, because once I started to look at what that could look like and growing my business and ultimately taking me out of the tuition side eventually, I realized that it was actually not as hard as I thought it was. I'd built this up into this really big thing and difficult thing in my head that I was scared of.
If you could bottle the top 3 learnings that you've had through taking tutors on, because this is a big question that people have. I think one of the most common education businesses is probably going into tuition because it's not that different in some ways to teaching itself. And I see so many people ask, how do I take tutors on? What have been the top 3 things that you've learned that you could pass on to other people in the same situation?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I would say the top 3 things that I've learned is to do your research, first of all. I would recommend speaking to either a HR specialist or a lawyer and just finding out what you are and aren't allowed to do around all the legalities of taking on other tutors. That was the thing that scared me the most, really. I was worried that I was going to do something wrong. And instead of just going and finding out, I just didn't. And once I'd actually had that conversation with someone and talked through what I wanted my business to look like and which model I wanted it to look like, it was much easier to do that then. So definitely speak to somebody who knows what they're talking about, an expert. Secondly, I would say make sure you get your pricing right and make sure that you are looking at your profit and all your costs that you are going to incur for taking on tutors, and include your time in that, because it's very easy to just add an ad hoc amount onto the top and think that sounds a reasonable amount, especially because I'm not going to be delivering the lesson. But actually, once you start taking into account tax and expenses and your time, and depending on the model you've got and VAT and all those different things, then it needs to be much more considered and thought out for it to be a business that will work for you as well as the tutors. And then I think thirdly, just get started. So I started by just contacting people that I knew that I'd known as tutors already and I knew had really good reviews and feedback from parents, and approached them and asked them if they would want to come on board. And I started with people that I felt really confident with, and that just made the process so much easier. And then once I got that process in place, basically once I'd taken on the first tutor, it was just repeating that process with all the other tutors. I would say, yeah, just definitely get started. As anything that we do in business, we learn from the action and from actually doing it. So I think that's my top 3.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. Did you feel like you got pricing wrong in the first place and then had to correct?
Yeah, a little bit. I definitely didn't think as long term as I needed to. I didn't think about the forward planning of adding on things like VAT and the fact that profit is, or the amount that I'd added on top for the tutors wasn't pure profit, and obviously tax and things needed to come out. I'd done it a little bit, but I don't think I'd done it enough over a bigger scale as well. And by that, I mean thinking about okay, when I got 2 or 3 tutors, it was only taking up X amount of my time. But then as I added in more and more, my admin and things increased. So yeah, definitely had to do some readjusting to think, if I'm spending more of my time doing this part of the work, is it going to be worth my time for the amount of profit that I'm getting? So it's been a learning curve, just like everything else. But I do think that sometimes you don't know what something would look like until you've done it. So you just have to take the action and try it and start down that path and adjust as you go. And I think, to be honest, I've done that with everything that I've done and changed.
You absolutely do need that flexibility to learn and grow and be able to make it work. The best entrepreneurs basically say, we'll just keep trying things until we find the thing that sticks, we find the thing that works. And I remember at Classroom Secrets when we adopted a more corporate approach for a period of time, and it was way too corporate for the size of the company. And it stressed me out that people needed to know what details I would need in 9 months' time, where there was no flexibility in it at all. Thankfully, we don't work in that way anymore. We obviously have really brilliant long-term plans, but we have flexibility in the interim, which is really helpful. So always keep the ability to have those little tweaks and do that learning. You mentioned before that you built up in your head that it was going to be really hard to take tutors on. And I know lots of tutors who are in that situation or have been in that situation. And I was in the same situation as well. I didn't want to take on freelancers because I was worried what that would mean. And then I didn't want to employ people because I was worried what that would mean. Do you still build things up in your head in business? Or do you feel like you've learned from that experience and now approach things differently?
I think I've got much better at not building things up in my head. I wouldn't say that I don't do it at all. I just don't think I do it as much or for as long a period of time as I did. I've got much better at being braver about trying things out. Like the perfectionist side of me is going or disappearing or reducing the longer that I'm in business. And I'm much happier to put something out, to share something, see how things go, see what people's reaction are, what they think, whether they're interested in things, whether it's going to be useful for them, and investigate things and start things much quicker than I ever did before. I think I experiment a lot more. That's probably the crux of it. I'm happy to experiment. Whereas before, when I first started my business, if I didn't think it was 100% perfect before, I wouldn't share it. I wouldn't share it with anybody, or I wouldn't go on the next step with it. And I just don't do that anymore. I think I take action much quicker. So yeah.
You're still quite new in business and taking tutors on. Where will you be in 10 years?
Oh my goodness, I find that so hard to answer. I think there's a couple of reasons why. One is that I change my mind quite a lot. So even when I do plan out, which I try to plan out like the next 12 months or what the next 5 years might look like, I invariably change it as I go along, and each year looks much different from the one before. But the other reason that I find it really hard is because in 10 years' time, I'm going to be 60. And I just find that really hard to imagine not because 60 is old, but because when I was like in my 20s, when I started teaching, in my head, 60, I was going to retire at 60. I was going to take my teacher's pension and walk off into the sunset and go on holidays constantly and not do much else. But I am so far from wanting to do that I find it really hard to think, what will I want to do then? My kids will have left home and be adults, and I don't think I can go 10 years. I can imagine 5. I know what I want to do in 5, but I'm not sure that I do in 10.
Lindsey, thank you so much for your time today. In your opinion, what have we not talked about that we should have talked about that would help other education business owners?
I think the only thing that maybe we haven't really spoke about too much is about mindset, and how it's something that I've been working on since the minute I started my business, whether that's money mindset or mindset of sharing what I do on social media, or mindset around what prices I charge. And like, it's just a continuous work. And I've spent the last 4 years working on different things to help me with my mindset. And I think it's just going to be a continuous journey, because the next thing happens and I have to work on that area or that element of whatever I'm doing. And I don't think it ever stops. I think it just changes. So I think just being prepared that like issues and things will come up, that you might block yourself, and you have to spend some time, or it's helpful to spend some time working on yourself, because we can be our own worst enemy. And I know I stood in my own way lots of times, and it's just an ongoing journey.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, your knowledge and expertise, Lindsey. It's really appreciated. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.